a century.
True that.
She currently splits her time as a researcher between Stanford and the VA healthcare system. She's collaborated on numerous design development research projects with engineers, as well as medical and undergraduate students. Her current work includes testing and integrating technology into the rehabilitation setting for individuals with Parkinson's disease, stroke, spinal cord injury, hand and orthopedic surgery, and rehabilitation, and problems related to aging, balance problems related to aging. She works on researching problems of hand rehabilitation and treatment related to post-surgical pain and thumb arthritis, and continues to develop novel treatments for post-stroke survivors privately in the community, and she talks in my class. So let's welcome Debbie Kenny.
All right, this is kind of a new setup here. So the first thing that's probably really important, and most people don't know, is what's this OTR? And that's not working. Okay. That pointer's not going to work. Okay, that's new. So OTR, occupational therapist registered. Does anybody not in the community know what an occupational therapist does?
Helps rehabilitate after an injury or surgery so that more range of motion can be gained to help improve quality of life.
That's a small area. So so we do that. Also illness, including mental, cognitive, as well as physical. And our goal is to get people as independent as possible. The way we differ a little bit from a physical therapist is that we tend to use occupation as the therapeutic tool. So you guys there, you may have done a little bit of rehab yourselves. And you know when you go to the PT, what do they tell you? Work out, do the weights, pull the cords and things like that. But you can do some of those same exercises and do them in a very way that's related to something that you enjoy doing. So for instance, when I had a shoulder problem and I had young children and I really needed to work on that range of motion, I really needed to work on the strengthening, I was pushing them in a swing. All I had to do was turn my body to get the range of motion that I needed. A really easy thing. If I had to sit there and use the TheraBand, I wasn't going to do it. Okay? So that's a really big difference between PT and OT. But so let's talk a little bit again. So we use a lot of assistive technology within occupational therapy, again, because the goal is, again, to be independent, right? So we're looking at assistive technology for mental and physical activities, for improving your function. So overcoming a disorder and impairment. So sometimes people come in with something like carpal tunnel. I can give them a splint or some other assistive technology device, or I can set them up ergonomically and I can make the disease go away, right? So prevent worsening of condition. The same thing again with carpal tunnel being a really great example that you might be familiar with, is that, you know, if you set yourself up ergonomically and you've got carpal tunnel, maybe we can make the carpal tunnel not get any worse. And then strengthen a weakness. So some diseases cause weakness, and even being in a cast for a long time, if you come out of a cast, you can be very, very weak afterwards. And again, you want to use maybe some assistive technology to help you to strengthen that. So goal being independence, right? So when we're talking about this, and we talk about a lot of the areas that we're doing, especially when we're talking about occupational therapies, we talk about ADLs. ADL stands for Activities of Daily Living. So self-care, and mobility being one of them. And you can see a lot of different forms of assistive technology, from very simple assistive technology like the 4-point cane that you see the woman in the lower left using, to something that is like the ReWalk for somebody with spinal cord injury, where it's computer adaptive technology. It's helping her to walk where she normally wouldn't be able to walk. And then insoles. You ever think of insoles as assistive technology? It's a big one, right? And you guys might use those in sports, right? And it improves your performance, right? And maybe it also keeps you from getting injured. and that's an important factor too. Okay, dressing being a really big one, and again, going from really simple things with like Velcro, and some of you guys have some of the sock aids like you see in the top with the black sock, to really simple like the curly Q, shoelaces, right, and different kinds of shoes, and it, you know, and we talk about meal prep. Meal prep's being important. One-handed can openers, one-handed bottle openers, reachers. Now, you don't have to have a disability to use some of these devices. I use the reacher in my kitchen, and I also use the woman in the lower left. She has a material, it's called Dyson. This table has blue Dyson. Check it out. It's got a really high coefficient of friction. If you put something on it and you just lean on it, nothing's going to slide. Okay? So I use it actually to open jars. It's great for opening jars. Eating. So we go again from very simple, something like a C cuff or something to keep food from falling off a plate, to somebody who doesn't have any use of their hands and arms and is using a robot to help them to feed themselves. And then this really cool one, I don't know if you've seen this from Google up in the upper right, and that's for people who have a lot of tremor, and it keeps the spoon stable. And it uses a little gyro, is that correct?
Right.
Yeah, to keep it stable.
This is the technology fair.
Cool. Yeah, it's a really nice piece of device. And one of the things that Google's done that's really interesting, yeah, is, and do you use it?
I have.
Yeah.
And it's really wonderful.
And it's inexpensive compared to a lot of other assistive technology at that level. And that's something we'll actually talk about later, is a little bit about that. Hygiene being, of course, important. We've got a Toto washlet, and we've got something that measures the temperature of the water in case you have no sensation, can't feel how hot water is. You need to know that you're not going to scald yourself. And there are disease conditions that cause that problem. Communication, we've got a Braille device that also works with the internet. It's very interesting. We have speech to text recognition, hearing aids. And then this one in the very right is something that Dave came up with. It was a finger spelling hand for people who are both blind and deaf. So somebody could type in what they wanted to finger spell, and that person could feel that. And it had to be articulated in such a way to be able to go between all the different letter combinations. It was actually a tricky engineering project. And leisure. You can't forget leisure. It's not all work, it's not all play, it's not all self-care. We have to have a balance on all of those things. And the wheelchair that's down in the bottom right is a wheelchair that actually exists at Santa Cruz at Natural Bridges area. It's to allow you to get out onto the sand, those really big wheels.
I have done that.
Yeah. And there's portable driving aids. There's just if you're one-handed, there's in the lower left something to help you if you're one-handed to make the turns, and the one-handed joystick for video gaming.
But there's another thing for the accelerator too. Accelerator brake.
Yeah. And those red and blue things are portable hand driving devices that are really cool. Again, you also need to be able to work, and some of it is things like the exoskeletons are being used not only by people with disabilities, but also by people with abilities to prevent them from getting injury, and that's really an important concept I want to get across. Yeah. And so there's a lot of equipment out there. A lot of equipment out there. And a lot of times the people who need that equipment don't know what that equipment are. And sometimes the people who need that equipment need to get a prescription from their doctor in order to get that piece of equipment. If you want the insurance company to pay them for that piece of equipment. The equipment goes up in price fast. And you're going to see this at the end when we do the little interview session. We're going to list some prices of some of the devices that some of these people have used. Okay? So a lot of people out there with a lot of knowledge. And this ties in with something that Dave said earlier. So when you're looking to see what's already out there, you might want to involve some of these people that might have something to do with that prescription. Not just try to use Google search terms. I find that sometimes you guys kind of miss the mark because you don't really know all the little tricks that some of us know. I'm happy to mentor and help you guys out that way. So reach out. I'm happy to help. So when I go in and I'm trying to give a piece of adaptive technology to somebody with a disability, I go through a processes, and say that involves a lot of different components. One is the patient evaluation. I need to really look at who that patient is and maybe do a home evaluation where I introduce the device. Is it inpatient? Is it outpatient? How am I instructing that patient? How am I training that patient? And again, a written justification if I need the insurance company to pay for that device. Wheelchair being a great example. Wheelchair cushions being another really great example. So home inpatient evaluation. So I'm looking at a lot of different components. I really want you to pay attention to this particular slide. And the reason why is when we do this interview portion, that's going to be the second half of my talk with some of my former students from the REACH program. I want you to think about all these different categories: health status, economic, physical environment, social aspect, and personal. So when I'm thinking about health status, I'm looking, is that person going to get better? Do I expect them to get better? Are they going to get worse, or have they plateaued? What is their economic? Can they pay for the piece of equipment that I'm looking at? Will their insurance company pay for it? If their insurance company won't pay for it, can they pay for it? A great example of that is that you think that Medicare would pay for everything. You get a wheelchair and you think, yeah, well, okay, well, now I need a shower bench and I need something for over my toilet and stuff like that so I can transfer. Well, they won't necessarily cover all those pieces of equipment. They may cover some, but not all. So again, people have to pick it up, and if they have a disability, maybe they have a decrease in their how much money is coming in. So that may be a factor in what you actually prescribe to somebody. Their physical environment: are they renting in an apartment? You know, how are they living by themselves, or are they living with a caregiver? So when I first came into being an OT, I didn't look at that physical environment too much. My goal was always to get everybody to be able to dress themselves before they left the hospital. Okay, that seemed like a really good goal. You should be able to dress yourself. Well, I found out that in certain cultures and in certain families that people had caregivers at home, and the caregivers, is just a natural part of their culture, would actually dress the parent. And that was not a goal for them, and I shouldn't be working on that with them. So when you look again at what you're doing, it's not that you're giving a piece of equipment to a diagnosis. You're giving a piece of equipment to a person, and that person has all these different factors. Social aspects are really important. Some people do not like to look disabled, will reject a cane, or will only like a cane maybe that looks really cool, or maybe they want to pimp out their wheelchair so it looks really cool. And then there's a lot of personal factors, other personal factors. What is it that you like? What is it that you're trying to do? What is it that you enjoy doing that you can't do that I need to address first? So when I'm looking at adaptive equipment. So there's, again, different levels of adaptive equipment. Most of the equipment that you have on your table is called low technology adaptation. So it's easy to use. I can show you really quickly, probably within 5 minutes, and maybe you can practice once or twice and you kind of get how to use this piece of equipment. And again, they're fairly inexpensive. Then you have elementary technology. It may use batteries or a more extensive training period. This is a great example of a splint that's used for people with stroke to help them to open their hand and to be in a good resting position. It is almost impossible if they are by themselves to put on this splint. Not totally impossible, but just really difficult. So again, and they start going up in price, but a lot of these this one you can't get off the shelf, but a lot of them you can get off the shelf. Most of them are inexpensive, but not all. This again is one that isn't inexpensive. Do you know what the price is, Julie?
It's about $250.
Okay. Yeah, and this one, by the way, I got because it was fitted for somebody. It was really inappropriate for them, and it ended up along with the 5 other splints in their closet. So it's really important, as I said, to really consider all the factors. Somebody didn't consider all the factors. They just saw somebody whose hand looked like this, and it looked like it was really, really painful and really, really awful, and in fact, it didn't hurt her. And in fact, it didn't improve her function at all to splint and actually hurt her more. High technology. So there's robotics. They can be expensive. A lot of training's involved. Even when you stick somebody in something like a power wheelchair, you need to give them a lot of training. You can't just set somebody off. That's how people end up into the walls. Okay? So highly complex, maybe they're programmable, maybe they have parts that'll break and you have to know how to fix them, or you have to change lots of things in them. They're very individualized in the most part. So whenever possible, I suggest in your projects, keep it simple. Don't overcomplicate your designs, especially in a course of this length of time. You just don't have the time for that. And again, it's not a one-size-fits-all technology. So here's an example. For total hip replacements, people are not allowed to bend past 90 degrees for certain approaches to total hip. So if you want to wash your foot, or you want to wash your lower part of your legs, how are you going to do this? We see the sponge. Any other ways people can think of how to do this?
Leaning down.
You can't lean down because that's going to take you past 90. Okay.
A stick.
So you could use a hose. Okay. What else? Anything? Stick.
Taped to the bottom of the tub that you can then rub your feet on.
Yeah, you could do.
Right here.
Yeah, you could do that. That's got to show them the other side. It's got a suction. Yeah, exactly. So the interesting thing, so this is a fairly standard piece of equipment that we give to people after total hip, so they'll keep the precaution. But if you look at people about 1 month out, and you look at who's using them, only about 1/3 of the people are using them. So what are they doing? They're doing other things. Maybe they're using their other leg to even wash. There's all kinds of different ways around them. And the same thing with these sock aids. Again, you wouldn't want to reach down to put on your sock, so maybe you'd use something like the sock aid to put on your sock. You put the sock over it, throw it down onto the floor, and you kind of scoop it up, right? But a lot of people end up doing what after it? So why do a lot of people end up not using their sock aid? Anybody back there? Why do people not use their sock aid at about a month?
It's hard.
Yeah, so it's hard if they wear sandals or other shoes that don't require socks. Yeah, exactly. Or they'll have somebody else put it on, right? Okay, so be careful. So how does this relate to you guys? So involve all stakeholders early on. As I said, try to involve the therapists if there's a therapist or physical therapist, occupational therapist, audiologist, whatever it is that you're doing that might be related to your design. So end users, rehab team therapists, and family members. Family members play a really important role into how that is, especially, if the people are not living independently, they may have a preference about how that it would or would not work for somebody, okay, and they have insight. So some website links that will be available. These are some sites that have a lot of adaptive equipment to them. Remember that disability does not equal inability. You can still do a lot. Just set your mind to it. And the reason I included this was one time, when I talked about things like the splint ending up in people's closet, people wanted to know where they could actually donate products too. So this is a resource I put on there. There's a couple of just other links. And now we want to go to the caregiver interviews. So I'm going to bring up the patient interviews. So I'm going to bring up two of my former students from the REACH program, which was a program where we did therapy in the community in a group setting through Foothill College. So if Albert and Michael could come up here. So while they're coming up, let's go over the rules a little bit. So what I want you to do is to explore with them who they are and what kind of equipment that they might need. Okay?
I just want to say one thing about your previous slide. The Silicon Valley Independent Living Center, LVA Monthly Assistive Technology, their vendors, and they have a lending fiber these kind of devices. So they'll be talking about that for some devices here at the end of February.
Okay, so I'm going to show some pieces of adaptive equipment. We're going to start with some really simple pieces of adaptive equipment, and you're going to tell me whether or not these guys use the adaptive equipment. Okay, and so no letting on, right? So you can ask them questions about personal, social, physical environment, those kinds of things, what motivates them. Again, you're not allowed to ask if they directly use this piece of adaptive technology. I'm going to go over really briefly about stroke. So stroke can happen two different ways. It can happen through a clot, or it can happen through a bleed, and what happens is then you end up with injury to the brain, usually one-sided. And so depending on which side the injury is depends on what kind of symptoms that you will have. So for instance, in a left brain injury, you have the right side paralysis. You also might have speech deficits, what's called aphasias, where you aren't able to say the words that you want to. Right is left side paralysis, and there's sometimes memory deficits and other things that happen with that. So that's just a really brief overview. Okay, so this is my favorite. This is a rocker knife.
Oh, wait. That's it.
Okay. Every year. So rocker knife. Why do you think we use a rocker knife? Might use a rocker knife with this population? So I told you they have paralysis usually on a side. So what's the advantage? What's the mechanical advantage? It also does what? By rocking the knife, it does what? Anybody else? What do you think happens with your food if you saw back and forth without using a fork? It's going to move around. So this keeps the food from moving around by rocking. Okay, so the mechanical advantage, right? So it's really cheap. I can show you how to use it really, really quickly. Okay, so let's learn about these guys. I'm opening up the floor for questions. You guys ask these guys questions, and you can ask beyond just about their eating habits and whatnot, and just find out a little bit about these guys. And then we'll take a couple minutes and then find out if they've used this device or not. Okay.
You guys cook for yourself?
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
It depends, of course, if you have a partner who likes to cook, it's always a partner.
Yeah, okay.
But I try to be independent, and so I'm typically all by myself at home, so I have to figure out an easy way to do things. You can buy them, you can go to Costco, buy the fish all sliced up, right? So all you need to do is just marinate and cook them.
Albert?
I'm pretty independent, eating by myself. Nobody else will.
Okay.
Plus, my mom cooks everything for me. that she does everything.
She's like, that's because she's a great cook. Other questions that you guys want to ask these guys? Okay.
In my case, I have like a cutting board with it looks like a vice grip, so that in case you want to slice breads or slice up vegetables, and then you can flip something, it has spikes, and you can just,
So, but you're asking about which they prefer. How do you, which being independent versus being helped? I think was the question.
I prefer to be independent because before I had my stroke, I used to travel quite a bit internationally, and I fly in and out of airports, and all of a sudden one day I was paralyzed, and that was a difficult situation. So,
Myself, I was cooking all the time before my stroke. But after my stroke, I'm not cooking because Mama, she's a good cook. I wait for her to cook me in India. But in reality, my mom helps me a lot with the food, with the cooking. Plus, when I need to cook, my arm does the work. So I need help from somebody to help me for food.
I want to point out that both these guys do have some arm and hand movement. It's not like they don't have any arm and hand movement. It's just that it's very difficult.
Limited.
It's
the
very limited.
granularity is not there,
Yeah.
you
And
can do that, but
and the energy that it takes to do that.
No.
But I like your
Only
question.
one.
So this is both of these tend to be independent, very independent guys when they can. But I think that the reality is that sometimes you need help.
Right.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about your living situation right now?
yeah, I'm usually at home by myself with my son's cat, and I drive. I was motivated to drive because outreach was, as we were talking earlier with Daniel, it was inconvenient and they were late all the time. And when they picked me up after school and at 12 and I'm supposed to be home for lunch, I don't get home till about an hour and a half later. And by then you're really hungry.
Yeah.
But so I learned to drive. So I'm independent that way.
And you have a wife.
Yes, and I have a wife.
Myself, I can, I'm going for therapy like almost every day, 4 times a week. Plus when I go home, I'm out almost the whole day from 8 to 6 o'clock, sometimes till 9. I go for meeting, for stroke support group, plus for therapy. At home, when I go home, everything is ready for me. The only thing I need sometimes help to put my brace, because this leg is very stiff. So my mom helped me to put the brace, but not always, sometimes.
Yeah.
And I can't do the buttons,
Okay.
like this button.
So I'm going to move on. So do people think that Michael uses this device? Who thinks? Raise their hand. About 70%? Okay. Who thinks that Albert uses this device? Less? Okay. All right. Do you ever use
I don't use it because if I want it sliced, I use the chopping board with the vice grip. Because you prepare your food, you chop them up, and might as well chop it up all the way, and then when it's all cooked, you don't need to cut them.
See?
I used at the beginning for the first 2 years. After that, I'm not using that anymore.
And is there a reason?
because I got better about my arm and I can do more. I can do more.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Sure.
Okay,
And one more thing, I used to be right-handed, so I'm right dominant, but then when the
Left-handed.
stroke, now I'm left-handed, so I learned to write and do everything with my
okay,
hand.
okay. So now we're going to, another really quick low-tech device, this octopus stand. Not going to tell you what it's for, why one of these people uses it, or has used it. Maybe doesn't use it so much anymore. But any other questions people need to ask to figure out if anybody uses this octopus stand?
What types of hobbies do you like to do when you're not busy?
I love photography.
Same thing for photography.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
And electronics, any electronic device I can work on and fix it, no problem.
So broken electronics.
Exactly.
These guys, you want to tell them what your profession was prior to your stroke?
When I had my stroke, I was the VP of our own company, and I suffered a stroke in Tokyo. I was all by myself. And so you can imagine I woke up one evening, I was halfway on the hallway, and they took me to the hospital with a very small ambulance because the people there are shorter.
Small.
So yeah, as I said earlier, I was flying in and out of airports because I was responsible for international sales and marketing.
I was electromechanical engineer, worked for a Members Corporation and Kodak and Restographic. I have on my own business the last 6 years. Then all of a sudden I had a stroke on my right side. When I was coming from the car, I fell behind the car. Then I thought I have heart problem. Before my stroke, I had open heart surgery. After open heart surgery, I had a stroke on my right side.
And you can talk for several years.
Yeah, plus
No.
I didn't talk for 2 years, and my arm was on my chair for 6.5 years. My leg used to sit for 15 years.
They like to say that there's a 1-year window of recovery. It's not true. Don't
Right.
listen to them.
Exactly.
Just don't listen to them. So, any other questions we need to ask about the octopus stand? Because I want to get to the other devices, and I know we're running late. Any other ones?
It's a hold the camera.
Well,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, okay. Maybe, maybe yes, maybe no. Okay, all right. Who do you think that Michael used an octopus stand? Okay, about quarter, okay. Who do you think Albert used an octopus stand?
Have they
Okay, truth here, all right.
yeah, I used it when I was. It was my hobby in high school. Then after, when I came here and started working, everything stopped. And when I was on my road to recovery, I needed something to distract me, and my passion was photography. And it's a good thing to find what you're passionate about, because the brain doesn't have to really think hard about what to do and all this kind of stuff. Otherwise, the brain gets into a freeze mode. And then I had aphasia, which means I have short-term memory loss. And I cannot remember after I read the sentence, by the time I get the middle sentence, I wonder what it was all about. So, but with something that you're passionate about, you don't have to think, because the knowledge is deep inside your brain.
And that's what occupational therapy taps into a lot. Who thinks Albert uses it or has used it? Oh, a lot more people. Albert?
Yes, I did do that.
Okay.
Because my hobby is photography, long time ago. So I have many cameras at home, because the camera is too big, I can't hold it. So
Yeah.
I use the tripod. I also have the big tripod at home.
Yeah. You want to show them the little one that you have? Do we have? I think we have a sec to show them the little one. While he's getting this out, I'm going to go on to the next slide. which is the
This
splints.
is my prototype. It's now very loose because I use it quite a bit. And then I evolved that one to something more rigid. I added a camera mount. I had somebody mill the aluminum, and then I added a switch with a cable release to go to the camera. And when I look into the camera, because all cameras are right-sided shutter release, right? And I have a good lens on the left. So I can actually trigger the camera simply by.
Wow.
And then I had another project that I wanted to extend it, and with a mono pad, I could use something like this.
It's a little foot switch, yeah. Got it? Okay.
It has also an input device, similar. All I need is a cable. So in essence, an extension of that. So you need a couple of points or to anchor something, and when you're then you can take a picture.
Yeah.
Tap on it and click it.
If you want to come up and see his latest iteration, we'll come up after class. I want to go on to the next one, which is the Sabo Flex Sabo Stretch. So Sabo Stretch is to keep somebody's hand open in a kind of more functional position, so it's not all curled in. Albert's got an ability to open up his hand really well. Michael, a little bit less so. Let's see. If you get that, yeah. You wanna?
I can close. It's easier to close than
Than it is to open. Yeah. And so people will use these devices to kind of stretch, and then the other one is to kind of more functionally use it to get the can open so you can actually use flexion. The thing is, you can't do much with the Sabo Flex on. Does anybody need to ask questions of either of the two, whether to decide whether or not they use it? No?
So before I couldn't open my hands, it was always locked on my chest for
Yeah.
6.5 years. Then eventually I went to Israeli college with a lot of therapy. They put my hand on the pedal, tied down, did like this.
Yeah, a lot of thing. Okay, let's go over this because we have a couple more. Who thinks Michael used this ever? Nobody. Who think Albert used this ever? Okay. Did you ever use either of these two devices?
No.
And look at the price. I want you to look at the price on these. Yeah, it's a lot of money for a splint, okay? And as I said, this is the Sabo Stretch. It belonged to another student of mine. It was in the closet.
Is it only available by prescription?
This particular splint is. There are splints you can get out there on the market, but for people who've had a stroke, custom splints tend to be the way that they go because it's a not one size fits all, and everybody's tone is different. When we talk about tone, we're talking about how tight things are and reflexive tone.
Continuously or periodically?
Depends on how it's prescribed and what it's prescribed for. A lot of people will wear these at night, but again, if it makes your hand hurt and it doesn't add in any purpose, then we're starting to find out that through research that these are really not great devices. That for some people, very small percentage they work, but not everybody. Okay, here's an example of a kind of a robotic system to help somebody walk. And these are starting to run, depending on the device itself, about $90,000. Most insurance companies don't pay for it. Very few, few and far between. You've seen these guys walk up here. Do you need to ask questions about their walking? No? Okay. Who do you think might have used this? Do you think that Michael might have used this? No? Do you think that Albert might have used this? Okay, Albert?
Yes, I did.
And you're not using it currently because?
Because I had my first surgery, I'm not dragging my leg anymore. Plus, they put plate on my toes. It's not dragging, sliding. So before I stroke like this, now both my legs was flat.
Yeah. Lot of money for, and he got his free because he was helping demo it and stuff.
So when you say insurance doesn't pay for it, are you saying insurance doesn't pay for any of it or doesn't pay for the full amount?
Sometimes insurance will not pay for it at all. So, sometimes you have to make a really good argument why you need something that is expensive as this. So a great example would be why somebody would need an electric wheelchair versus a manual wheelchair. And sometimes they'll give you a manual chair and they will absolutely refuse to give somebody an electric wheelchair. Absolutely.
In your case, did you volunteer for the
Yes.
prototypes?
Yeah, I did because I was.
That's actually a picture of Albert, by the way. Underneath the, you got a big green face.
Because one day I was in Expo, a guy, he saw me, there's another lady, she had that device. Then the second time, the guy saw me, he was in the Expo, then he said, I have a device for you, come and see me. Then I went to Redwood City, they measured my foot, everything, then they told me go home. Then they went to Washington, they made the device with the spring, with everything. He came and put everything together, put on my waist. I started walking.
You were walking,
Didn't pay for it.
but you did not pay for it.
I didn't. It was $7 those days.
We have a question. We have a question
I
back
didn't
there.
pay any.
How often is the surgery used to give back mobility? You had surgery, right?
Yes.
How often is surgery used to give back mobility versus mostly just physical?
For him, it wasn't necessarily the surgery to get back mobility. The problem was he had such spasticity at the bottom of his foot that it was causing him, when he foot planted, to foot plant incorrectly. So that what made his gait very unstable. So they actually went and fused his ankle, as well as did some tendon lengthening stuff to decrease the spasticity underneath it.
More from a curiosity perspective and like the insurance perspective, how much did the surgery cost versus with a piece of assistive technology? Would have cost it?
Oh God, your surgery, and if you probably looked at your bill in general, you didn't see a bill because he's with Kaiser and with
Exactly.
Medicare and stuff. But the fact was that you were in rehab for what, 6 months?
6 months.
That's a lot of expense that's involved in that.
So then from purely from an insurance perspective, wouldn't it for them sometimes be, purely from their perspective, a better decision to pay for assistive technology?
Sometimes, and as I said, you can make a rationale, but the problem with something that's as complex as this device, which actually has motors and electronics and all kinds of things in it, is that they break down. They're not a forever thing. They don't last forever. So how often are you going to have to replace it? So, for instance, they replace your electric wheelchair every 5 years.
This
Yeah,
month,
but a lot of times they'll break down starting around 3 if you use them a lot. So there's a lot of issues here that have to do with finances, insurance companies, and so when I drill home this message about keeping it simple, one of the reasons is because of things like, a device like this, where you're talking about thousands of dollars, and maybe is a benefit, maybe is not a benefit. You don't know until you kind of test drive it with somebody. You have to be really careful about who you're applying it to. Yeah.
But
So,
for me, it's benefit because I can't do nothing without my wheelchair.
right. Yeah, for long distances, he's still not able to walk long distances. He's better after the surgery, but it's still an issue.
In my case, I was on wheelchair for 9 months after my stroke. And then my insurance stopped paying for the outpatient
10 more? Okay.
therapy. And they just told me, okay, just be careful, don't take any risk, you can go home now. I said, and what am I supposed to do? So I didn't listen to them. I was motivated to walk and try to figure out something. Again, I attribute that to my problem-solving mind.
But I have a memory problem. I remember faces more than names. I don't remember numbers and names, but I remember faces. For every year, I remember them next year, but I don't remember names and numbers. That's my problem.
That's because we're older.
So something else to throw into the mix, right, when you're considering it. So you see there's a lot of personal factors, a lot of social factors, there's economic factors, there's factors, in terms of does it do what you want it to? Is there an outcome that you want to measure, and does that device actually meet that goal for that outcome? And there's a lot of thought that goes into it. So when you're designing a device, you need to consider all these components.
Sometimes a simpler device is easier to use, and you don't even think about it. So it might even get more use out of it. So keep it in mind.
Are you guys able to provide
I type Sigma Labs.
Send I'm left typer with one hand.
I learned to write Sigma Labs because I was right-handed. So when I was in the hospital, I was thinking about my trip. I had obligations, but with my aphasia, I could not even remember. So I told my wife to get me a notebook, and I began writing Sigma Labs.
So I can use my left hand to write, but I can't type good. With one finger. A, B, C, D, with one finger. So.
Yeah, and even though you've got some fairly good movement, you're right, he has a lack of sensation, and it's just very awkward to do that, so he tends not to incorporate it in activity, which drives me nuts as an OT. My goal is to always get him to use it more.
I can do voice recognition CD. I put on a computer. I can talk with the computer will type for me.
For me, it was difficult to have something like a pulse recognition because right after my stroke, my tongue was actually twisted. So my mind heard me thinking clearly, but when I spoke, it was really it's difficult to understand. After my 5 weeks of speech therapy in Japan, the speech therapy asked me whether I wanted to hear my first tape. I said, yeah. And I said, is that me? I could not even recognize what I was saying.
Yeah.
I just have a question because I know nothing about stroke or any of what happens after. So I was just wondering why having a stroke made it so that both of you had to leave your jobs and occupations.
In my case, I was paralyzed and I had aphasia, and then usually when you go out and apply for a job or something, they ask whether you can carry 5 pounds. I couldn't do that, and I'm a math major, by the way, so I can talk in terms of Cartesian coordinates, in terms of the left and right, negative and the positive. When you're a normal being, let's say you're in the center of the Cartesian coordinate, 0 means everything is normal. Let's say then you exercise, you buffed up, you want to do athletics, then you go to the positive side because your strength is stronger, you have more stamina. But when you have a stroke, it's not like just, oh, I was lazy for a week and then you're like -5, then you work back to 0. When you have a stroke, you go from 0 to maybe -50. So for you to go from -50 to -49, 45, you don't even notice the difference that you're improving. And that's where a lot of people get discouraged. So
Same thing with me. of course, I didn't work for many years. They thought that I can't do the work, plus I can't remember a lot of things. So they thought I'm going to be bad in making decisions, but my brain is working good because they know that I have disability, so they get distracted.
The assumption is that, yeah, you're
can make
disabled,
a lot of
including
mistakes.
memory, your mind, your thinking. But before my stroke, I said I was in sales and marketing. I even did product management. I did contracts. After my stroke, I couldn't even read the sentence and remember what's in there. So the way I overcame my disability was I pretended to speed read, because initially as I read and I couldn't understand, my mind just shut down because you're trying so hard. So I realized that the key is relaxation. So I began to meditate, relax. So when I do speed reading, I don't care whether I read every single word. I just pick up ideas, right? So the first month, I may pick up one word. It's okay. And then two, and then three. Or pretty soon, in 9 months, I was able to read the whole contract. After a year, I was able to write an article of incorporation. So things get better. So you never stop learning.
One more thing. Don't get stressed out. Stress is bad.
Yeah.
Stress is bad. My stroke was because of the stress. I smoked 16 hours a day. I was under so much stress. So then I had a stroke. Stress is bad. Don't get so stressed out. Just take it easy. Be happy. Be happy.
Yeah.
Be happy.
I really want to thank you too for coming, and you're an inspiration to everybody. I mean, the fact that you've really, pushed through. They're the exception rather than the rule of people who have stroke. A lot of people, as they say, kind of get discouraged and kind of give up, and these guys haven't, and they're wonderful to have in the class with us.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, let's thank Debbie as well for luckily, Stanford is a stress-free university.
I like that.
You take a sec, please, and bring the EDL equipment back up here, and I'm happy to talk to people after class.
If you haven't signed the attendance sheet, do it on your way out. You can leave your evaluation forms on the desk and we'll collect them. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for your participation today and all your questions.
May you stay
And have a great
injury-free.
weekend.
May you never show up in my clinic.